everyone, welcome to Grab a Stack of Rock, and episode 12 of 50 Years of Iron Maiden. We have our special guest back, Mr. Bicyclelegs from Bicyclelegs Talks Music. He has 3 favorite Iron Maiden albums that kind of dance around depending on the day, and this is the second of the 3 that you've got to discuss with us here on 50 Years of Iron Maiden. So thank you for coming on and doing this one more time.
Oh, thanks for having me back. I really enjoyed it the first time, so I'm looking forward to this one.
Me too. Well, I'll start us off with the regular preamble, and then we'll go to you with the first track. But Seventh Son of a Seventh Son is the 7th Iron Maiden studio album. It was recorded from February to March 88 and released on April 11th, 88. Very fast turnaround. Produced once again by Martin Birch. And this time, keyboards replaced the guitar synth that we had on Somewhere in Time. And Bruce Dickinson is back to songwriting. For the first time ever, Maiden did their first real concept album after several that were kind of mistaken for concept albums. The circumstances were coincidental. As mentioned, this was their 7th album, and Steve Harris had already written an album epic, the title track called Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Bruce Dickinson, meanwhile, on his own, had written down such lyrics as 7 deadly sins, 7 ways to win. So seizing this serendipitous moment, Maiden plunged forward with a tale of a boy born with healing powers and the ability to see into the future, anyone's future except his own. He is the 7th son of a 7th son, which in folklore, 7 sons without any sisters in between, the 7th having another 7th son, no sisters in between, was prophesied to be a healer or have powers of clairvoyance. In this story, the character's inability to see into his own future is something manipulated by none other than Lucifer himself. So what a better place to start there with the opening track, Moonchild, which introduces some of these characters and the story. Bicyclelegs, take it away, sir.
Wow. I mean, right from the start, they don't want you to forget this is their 7th album, do they? Because the 7s just keep recurring in this. As you say, it was kind of serendipitous, but I think once they realized what they had there, they really, really leaned into it. You know what I mean? And this song also sets up those themes that, I found this album less of a sort of real, I mean, it's a concept album, yeah, but it's not like a rock opera the way that a, Tommy or, Quadrophenia or something like that is. It's more an album to me that has recurring themes through it. And, you have the 7s, you have the sort of magic and mysticism, and you also get this sort of good versus evil kind of thing. And all of those kind of get set up in Moonchild. And, and also in the beginning of this song, we get the 2 sounds that I think make this album a little bit unique, which is the synthesizers and the acoustic guitars. Now, the acoustic guitars thing for me is a little bit funny because I don't know, you would have discussed this when you did the Somewhere in Time episode, but Bruce actually wanted to do like a lot of acoustic music on that album, didn't he? And he got shouted down. And that's why he ended up not having any writing credits on that album. Maybe he finally persuaded them to go with some acoustic music. Like, there's not a lot of it on this album, but there's little bits of it here and there. And it gives it a real flavor that I really, really like throughout the whole album. And, they take their time with this song. It's a good minute and a half before they get into the actual song of Moonchild. And then you get that, pretty typical Iron Maiden gallop that, everybody knows and loves. It's still recognizably Maiden. This song in particular, there's some heavier stuff on the album. This song's hard rock and that sort of thing, but it's not as heavy as some of the earlier Iron Maiden, I don't think anyway. But there's stellar playing from everybody on this song, as always. And the synths on this song are really only at the beginning and the end. Through the main body of the song, it's just your guitars, bass, drums, and has a pretty typical Iron Maiden sound, I think. But I think it's a wonderful way to open the album.
100%. And that acoustic intro followed by keyboards, it certainly must have thrown some longtime Maiden fans back in 1988.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned, yeah, Bruce wanted to do some he wanted to do some acoustic music around the time of Somewhere in Time. And I've always wondered if some of that acoustic music ever surfaced on his solo stuff. He did some acoustic B-sides like Winds of Change, and I've often wondered if that was one of the tunes that he submitted to Maiden. But yeah, it's great to have Bruce back on songwriting. He's writing this one with Adrian Smith, classic team up. My notes, the acoustics and keyboards are evidence right from the get-go as they form a major part of Moonchild. It's a strong opener, quickly getting up to speed, with lyrical angels and demons swooping upon you as Bruce spits out the words. I recall Bruce saying in an interview that he kind of put himself in the place of several characters on this album. And on this one, you can hear him playing Lucifer the devil. I am he, the bornless one, the fallen angel watching you. Bruce says that he drank some tea in order to get himself into character, which I find to be quite comical. But great opener. And then we're off to Harrison for his thoughts on Moonchild.
All right, first, just about the album in general, very quickly. Seventh Son of a Seventh Son is one of my top 5 Iron Maiden albums. The credit for this one for Martin Birch is Martin Disappearing Armchair Birch. And Bruce has described the previous album, Somewhere in Time, as a transitionary album, saying that they couldn't have done Seventh Son of a Seventh Son without first doing Somewhere in Time, and Somewhere in Time gave them the confidence to do something like Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. So Moonchild, great song. The story's coming through pretty strong on this one. Not every song on the album sticks as closely to it. The band have said they always wanted to put the music first rather than the story. And I appreciate that compared to an album like Operation Mindcrime, where the music just stops for like minutes on end for story. But anyway, that's a different thing. I love the contrast between the growly Bruce on the verses and the higher range on the chorus. That's something that we'll get in a couple of other songs as well, a bit of a theme on this album. And yeah, I won't complain about some synth in my Iron Maiden. I love the flavor of this album. It's got a very unique sound, which becomes very evident once we get to one of the B-sides. Actually, a few of the B-sides. But no, yeah, bring on more of this album. I love it.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing regarding the concept, as you guys have already mentioned. It is a little bit looser than, say, something like Operation Mindcrime. I kind of find it more akin to something like Kiss the Elder, where the songs aren't necessarily in the right order. We'll get into it, but although this is clearly an introduction to a great story, then you get a song like Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, the title track, that doesn't really fit into a storyline. It's more like a summation of everything we've heard so far. But the next track is a single. It was actually the 4th single, a track called Infinite Dreams, written by Steve Harris. And I would like your thoughts, Mr. Bicyclelegs.
Yeah. You know, I think I mentioned this comparison a little bit when we were talking about Powerslave, but it's much more the case here. And that is, if you played the intro, if I didn't know this album at all, you played the intro to this song to me and told me it was a long-lost Fish era Marillion track, I would believe you. Because the synth sound in particular, if you listen to that synth sound, it's the same synth sound that Mark Kelly was using sort of on Script for a Jester's Tear and Fugazi in particular, you know, really has that Marillion sound to it from those very, very early days. You know, the first verse of this song too, it starts off quite mellow for Iron Maiden, doesn't it? You know, it kind of gets crunchier as you go along, but it starts off really rather mellow and not very heavy at all. And, you know, and then that Marillion feel comes back in the second section of this song, you know, where the tempo changes and those synth pads come in. And again, it's that synth sound that, you know, that Mark Kelly synth sound from those first 2 Marillion albums. The twin guitar harmony passages on this are absolutely wonderful. And then you get the second tempo change in this song, and it's very much more sort of back into your traditional sort of Iron Maiden sounding part. This song is really, really proggy for a 6-minute song because it goes through 3 or 4 different sections, and each one is a different tempo and a different feel. And, you know, I love this song. I think it's one of the best songs on the album.
Absolutely. And I didn't really tweak to that Marillion similarity, but I'm hearing it now. Infinite Dreams. That's what the single art looks like. And I think this one kind of struck us as, oh, this is the cool deep cut when we first got the album. We had no idea Maiden were going to do 4 singles for this album. So we thought that this was our special deep cut. And I find that first opening bit to be very bluesy, almost like, Maiden revisiting that Strange World vibe. And then, of course, it gets a little bit heavier when he starts saying, suffocation, I cannot move. And really cool lyrics here about dreaming as well with Infinite Dreams. Nightmares and dreaming, always a good topic for Iron Maiden and for heavy metal in general. What else did I have to say about Infinite Dreams? Oh, the scream. Bruce lets loose the scream from hell at the halfway point of this song, roughly. And it's the first time that we as young kids notice, oh, Bruce, his voice is changing. It's getting raspier. It's getting rougher. And Harrison and I brought this up a little bit on the Somewhere in Time album, and we got a little bit of resistance from Peter Kerr when we mentioned that we thought Bruce's voice was starting to change a little bit. But I think you can definitely hear it on Somewhere in Time. I think this is sort of like the beginning of that new raspy Bruce. And definitely I'm hearing it, or at least that's how we heard it back in 88 when we first heard Infinite Dreams. Harrison, care to rebut or comment?
Well, there's no doubt that Bruce's voice has taken a hit in the late 80s. He's definitely not at the, like, you compare a song like Aces High when he's singing like entirely in that high register, and you compare anything on this album, you'll notice like he still sounds great. There are still moments of high notes to them, and especially once they would get out on tour, it would be very clear that this was considered a low point for Bruce's voice. But as I said, he still sounds great. Infinite Dreams, one of my favorite Iron Maiden songs of all time. I love how it builds and builds and builds in intensity from that bluesier, soft intro to Bruce singing his lungs out on the bridge before finally coming full circle to a bit softer again to finish it off. The twin guitars are sublime, and you get to hear them twice, once before the solo, once after the solo. I wouldn't count it as a deep cut. I just go out on a limb to say it's my favorite Bruce era song.
Favorite Bruce era song. Wow. That is okay. So that's a moment to mark and note, people who are watching this series. Harrison, his favorite Bruce era song is Infinite Dreams. Wow. Okay. On to the first single, Can I Play with Madness? Certainly a commercial choice for a first single. What did you think when you first heard it, Bicycle Legs?
It just screams hit single, doesn't it? I mean, and unusually for an Iron Maiden song, because they weren't generally a band that were chasing the hit single. Like if they had a hit single, that was kind of almost by accident rather than by design. This sounds like it was written specifically to be a hit single. And I don't want that to sound like a criticism, because I still think this is a really good song, but it is unusually accessible and catchy for
Well, that's interesting because
song.
it started out as a ballad called On the Wings of Eagles, Adrian Smith was working on, and then got completely revamped into this fun, catchy hit single almost. Yeah.
Well, there you go. The harmonies too, they add to the catchiness. The harmonies on this song too, you guys would know better than I would. Are they all Bruce, or are some of the other guys contributing to the harmonies there?
To my ears only, I hear only Bruce.
Okay.
Yes, that sounds about right. I think there was one song in my listening. It might have been a B-side. Yeah, I think one of the B-sides, maybe I was thinking, oh, is that Steve back there? But no, I think it's all Bruce.
So you've got this bunch of Bruces singing the chorus, the hook line, as it were. But even then, even in a super catchy song like this, even in a very, very commercial song like this, Iron Maiden can't resist a tempo change, can they? You know, there's still a tempo change in it, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And I think that beginning and ending with the title of the song a cappella is just a masterstroke. It just makes the song absolutely that much more catchy and earwormy. So yeah, I mean it's a perfect single in a lot of ways.
And those a cappella harmonies are perfectly produced, especially the last one where it just has that hair of an echo to end the song. So perfect. Yeah, I love Can I Play with Madness. You mentioned all the reasons why. Love that tempo change. The part where Bruce says, "Listen to me," said the prophet, and it changes the tempo there to something a little funkier maybe. But I love this song. The music video was interesting. It was the first time that they dared to make a music video without them in it. They're just only there for a few minutes on a TV screen playing some live footage. Otherwise, it's
Yeah,
Graham
that's
Chapman.
stock footage of Live After Death too, I
Right,
believe.
yeah. But otherwise, we've got Graham Chapman from Monty Python playing the lead character, sort of a headmaster at the school, and he's in charge of an art class, and he scolds the one kid for drawing an image of the sky with an eddy in the sky. I loved it. It was great. And then he stumbles into these catacombs, and there's all kinds of strange things happening. Sort of going full deep into that more symbolic side of Iron Maiden that they were trying to put across with the artwork and the lyrics this time. I have to confess that this is the first time that my friends and I bought an Iron Maiden album and kind of really scratched our heads trying to figure out what the hell Bruce was singing about. This song, by the way, is a Smith Dickinson Harris co-write. Great keyboard hooks during the chorus. Love it. One thing about Maiden is when they did go all in on keyboards, which I guess we'll call this their all-in album on keyboards. They did it well. They really did it effectively. It didn't soften the band. Seventh Son is maybe even heavier than Somewhere in Time, but that's not a discussion for this track. Over to you, Harrison, on Can I Play with Madness?
Right, I like it very, very much. It's a very fun, catchy little number. I particularly love that really neat synth work that goes on during the chorus underneath all the Bruces. You can actually hear it a lot better live because there's only one Bruce singing, and I think Steve on backing vocals when they do it live. But yeah, great song. Definitely a single worthy.
Absolutely. And so was this track. This was the second single, fourth and final song on side one, but this has to be one of my absolute favorite Derek Riggs pieces of art. The Evil That Men Do. A great track and a side one closer. What do you think, Bicycle Legs?
Yeah, it's one of those ones where the intro lulls you into a false sense of security, isn't it? Like it starts off sort of quiet and a bit moody and ominous and that sort of thing. And then it just explodes. You know, this is one of the fastest songs on the album. You know, it's got that real gallop to it. You know, the lyrics again are touching on that good and evil, eternal judgment. And then you've got the sevens coming back with the seven lambs slain, or the seventh lamb slain, sorry. You know, compared with some of the other songs on this album, it's relatively simple. You know, there's no tempo change in this song other than, you know, kicking in from the intro to the main part of the song. The rest of the song kind of goes along at the same tempo, the same feel all the way through. And that's fine. It's good to do different things on the album, I think. It's still a really, really effective song. And I can understand why it was picked as a single as well, because, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, would have sounded great on radio, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It looked good on the TV as a music video, but it was one of those live music videos where they just dubbed the studio track over. So we always kind of found that a little disappointing. Regardless, The Evil That Men Do has one of those Iron Maiden choruses that just soars. You sing along to it. It gets the crowd going. It's a wonderful chorus. Lyrically, we have the protagonist now, the seventh son of a seventh son, being tempted by the devil's daughter. There's one line, slept in the dust with his daughter, eyes red with the slaughter of innocence. But he seems to be legitimately in love with this woman, regardless of the fact that it's probably not going to end well for him. Fantastic track. Once again, this is a Smith Dickinson Harris co-write. I really like it. I think that I think the song represents one of those very few Maiden songs about love, although certainly in this case it's not a love song. Harrison, over to you on The Evil That Men Do.
Yeah, I love The Evil That Men Do. Bruce's voice soars, and the solo is phenomenal. Like, all of the solos on this album are phenomenal. I'd go as far as to say that this album has the best solos of their entire career. It's funny though, I've been listening to the live version so long. When I went back to the studio version and it kicks off into gear, it's just so slow compared to the live version. I'm actually much like, wow, this riff takes forever. Because when they play it live, they play it a lot faster, which would be a point of contention among a certain guitarist on this tour. We'll get to that a bit later. But the lyrics as well is funny because it's living on a razor's edge, balancing on a ledge. But when they sing it live, there's an extra like emphasis on. There's like an extra syllable at the end of the word ledge that is naturally forced out because it's not natural to end it on ledge. So Bruce ends up often singing balancing on a ledger. Blaze would go balancing on a leggio or lecho. Yeah, it's a bit funny to listen to it live because it's just the way that vocal melody is constructed. There has to be an exhale sound.
Yeah, 100%. You're right. I realize that now. Also, one cool thing that Bruce did in the music video, he was standing on top of the monitors and, balancing on a razor's edge. He would do this thing where he crosses his legs and kind of like falls backwards. It was really, really cool to see. So then we flipped the record over and we are greeted by this massive riff, this bum, 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 ba-da-dum, this almost military sounding thing, almost like a sequel to Alexander the Great. But we now have the title track, the album epic, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. What do you think, Bicycle Legs?
Oh, I think straight up, I'll say the first thing is I think the keyboards on this song are the best use of the keyboards on any song on this album. And it's all because they use this synth choir. And it just gives it, the intro, it gives it this really epic sort of spookiness, which I think is absolutely wonderful and totally apropos for this song. The concept of the seventh son of the seventh son, as you said, it comes from sort of medieval folklore and that sort of thing. The idea that he would have healing powers and clairvoyancy and all that. I think lyrically, it's just an absolutely fascinating topic. And yeah, I mean, you get all the sort of, recurring themes on the album. You've got the good versus evil. You've got the mysticism and magic. You've got the, sevens, obviously, with the seventh son of a seventh son. Funnily, considering this is the epic on the album, I mean, it's nearly 10 minutes long. It lyrically isn't that complicated. There's a lot of other songs that we'll get to, particularly here on side 2, that are a lot wordier than this song is. But it doesn't need to be an overly complicated lyric on this song, I don't think. I think you kind of summed it up well, Mike, when you were sort of like, this is kind of the story so far, as it were, rather than being actual part of the plot. It's kind of like, it's like, you'd get those two-parters on a show like NCIS and they'd have the previously on NCIS. This is kind of what this song is in a lot of ways, It's like, in case you missed side 1, here's a summation. And, again, musically, this gets quite proggy, especially the second half of this track, which is almost entirely instrumental. You get this spoken word part, which again, you get, the tempo shifts and changes in mood and all this sort of thing. You get this really creepiness comes back in for this spoken word part. And then you get about 3 or 4 minutes of just like instrumental stuff, again, in different sections and all this sort of thing. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. It's my favorite song on the album. Probably no real surprise to anybody who knows me that I'd pick the proggiest song on the album to be my favorite song on the album. But, but I can see why sort of like the hardcore metalheads may not have been so much into this album, because I know this album, it's a pretty beloved album these days. But when it first came out, it was controversial because of the use of the keyboards and all that sort of thing. And, I will say, I must mention this before I go on. This album is my best friend's favorite Iron Maiden album. It was his first Iron Maiden album, and it's still his favorite. So, and it's one of my absolute favorites as well. But as I say, I can understand why some of the really sort of, hardcore metalheads might have had their noses put out of joint with the keyboards and the progginess and all that sort of thing. But I think it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, the US in particular sort of went cold on this album a bit. It didn't do as well as some of their better stuff. This is where the US started to sort of turn off them a little, and you'd see that in the tours as well. This one for this album going forward, there were less and less US dates in them. They weren't doing that slog across the whole North and South like they did on the World Slavery Tour.
And I remember the blowback, in the magazines. You'd see the letters to the editor in the front page of the magazine saying, "Oh, I got the new Iron Maiden. Man, every band that I like is going soft these days." Because that's kind of the way it looked in general, in terms of general trends. Metallica had just dropped Injustice for All, which at the time was considered, oh, Metallica, they went soft. It was the atmosphere at the time, and people were worried about a lot of these bands. And I think that also figures into where the story will go in the future, because obviously the good ship Iron Maiden makes a couple of twists and turns going forward. But back to Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, the title track. I think that this might be the first time that we're starting to notice Iron Maiden getting a tad repetitive on the choruses. Seventh son of a seventh son, seventh son of a seventh son, seventh son of a seventh son, seventh son of a seventh son. And we certainly do see things like that happening a little bit later on with Virtual 11, perhaps. We won't get into that for a bit yet, but that's the argument that I'm making at this point in time, is that this is when we see what some people were starting to get irritated with, the repetitiveness of certain hooks and choruses in Iron Maiden. I think it starts here. That's just my opinion. Otherwise, I agree with everything bicyclelegs said. It has some wonderful whoa kind of hooks in this song. Some of the best use of those kinds of hooks in any Maiden song. So, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son for the win in general. Harrison, over to you.
One of the finest Maiden epics, period. Puts the epic in the word epic. I love every single bit of this song, but in particularly that soloing back half finale is the cream of the crop in the Iron Maiden discography. It's fantastic, every bit of it. At the start, you've got these atmospheric synth building in intensity before the solo kicks off. The solos are phenomenal as well. There's that one motif, the that they return to a couple times there, and then the synth returns for this one final epic finale to this finale to end all finales. Although it's not the closing track, of course, but anyway. What a song.
It could have been, sum up the entire album, close with that. But the story
does continue. It's unreal that they only played this song live on 2 tours. A song of this caliber just sitting in the dust. But it speaks to the rest of the quality of Iron Maiden's discography and their willingness to play new material. But I would have loved to have heard Seventh Son of a Seventh Son a bit more.
Of course. Okay, well, the story does continue, and it continues with the first Murray co-write on the album. Well, the only Murray co-write on the album was Steve Harris, a song called The Prophecy. So as the story picks up, what do you think, bicyclelegs?
Yeah, this starts off with clean guitars and synthesizers, which is not how anybody, I think, was expecting an Iron Maiden song to start, before this album came out. But again, it's one of those fake out sucker intros, it gets you into this little mood, and then it just sucker punches you by going into this really full on heavy track. But it's a little bit slower than, some other Iron Maiden songs. It's not one of their full on gallops or anything like that. And it's in a 12/8 shuffle, which is an interesting feel for Iron Maiden to take.
It sort of harkens back to Sanctuary for me, with that sort of like nautical swing to the riff. Not Sanctuary, Transylvania, that one. That has a very sort of like shuffle to the riff as well.
Yeah. You get tempo changes and it picks up for the solo and then it changes back. The solo is really great. This one and the next one, Clairvoyant, might be the wordiest songs on the album because there's a lot of lyrics in these songs, but they're only sort of, relatively short songs after the big long one that was Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. But, but I think they still work, as far as, the concept and the themes of this album. Obviously we're talking this one and the next one are talking about the Seventh Son's, psychic powers, as it were. And I love the dual guitars in this again. And then the acoustic outro is absolutely gorgeous. It's really, really, really beautiful. And unusually for a lot of this early Iron Maiden anyway, this song fades out. It doesn't come to a full ending. So I thought that was an interesting choice, not to bring it to a full end, but to just let it fade out with those acoustic guitars going along. So yeah, it's another really good track on the album.
As we discussed in the Somewhere in Time episode, the first time that they ever did a fade out on an album was actually Stranger in a Strange Land on that album. As Harrison pointed out, Women in Uniform faded out, but we don't count that single. So that's only really the second fade out on a Maiden song on a Maiden album.
Of five total across the whole discography.
There you go. But that's a really good one, and I almost don't consider it one of the 5 fade outs because it's so unique, and that acoustic segment is really different for Iron Maiden. It's very medieval sounding. It's very sad. It's very mournful. It sounds like something from like an early Judas Priest album, like you would have heard on Sad Wings of Destiny. But the lyrics are very cut and dried here. The Clairvoyant, the seventh son of a seventh son, has foreseen a disaster about to befall the village. He tries to warn them, and they don't listen. So what do? After the disaster befalls the village, they blame him for making it happen in the first place. So it illustrates something that you really got to dig into the lyrics to follow the story, to be honest with you. But the seventh son of a seventh sons, he cannot win. He tries to help, and it all just goes, as they say, belly up. We can probably read between the lines that this is Satan, this is Lucifer sabotaging him, but we don't really know. There's a lot of you got to use your imagination with this concept album. We know the premise. We know that good and evil are battling for this boy's powers. So, that's my interpretation of it, is that we're seeing some interference perhaps in the no-win scenarios that this boy is facing. Otherwise, melodically, I don't necessarily think it's the best song in the album. I think if we were ranking all the songs in the album, The Prophecy would probably be my least favorite, but it has such an appeal to it with the storytelling and that acoustic outro. To me, that acoustic outro is damn, that's a highlight of this album for me. It's just fantastic. And I guess Dave Murray must have written that. Anyway, over to you, Harrison.
Right, yes, it may be tempting to call The Prophecy the worst song on the album simply because every other one is just so good. But don't sleep on it. It's a great deep cut. I love it. I think it's just as good as all the other songs. That gentle melodic intro, I think, is perfect for after you've got this sort of massive, bombastic finale soloing of Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Rather than kicking it into gear, I love how they give you a little bit of time to breathe. That intro is my favorite part of the whole song. I love the swing shuffle that the riff has. It's always fun to listen to a song like that. The contrasting growly, soaring vocals is prevalent here as well. Of course, the fade out. I love this song, and I think it's great. And I do believe that this is the point in the story where our protagonist dies, and I believe that's what the acoustic outro represents. Because the next song, as you'll get into, well, we might as well get into it now, Mike.
May as well get into it now. So I will grab my wonderful die cut single here for The Clairvoyant. Really, really wild artwork by Derek Riggs this time out. Clairvoyant is the third single, and contrast to The Prophecy, it's really musically uplifting. What do you think, Bicycle Legs?
Yeah, I mean, it starts off with that wonderful bass intro from Steve Harris. Absolutely love to hear that, because he's such a great bass player and he's usually so upfront in their mix too. That's the one thing I will say about his bass playing. Apart from this intro, I don't think his bass playing is as upfront in the mix as it was, say, when we were talking about Powerslave, where it's right up front. It's almost lead bass on Powerslave in certain parts. He's a little bit back in the mix, comparatively speaking, but he gets his little moment to shine here with this absolutely wonderful bass intro. And you get synths to the fore on this song. But it's still a typically fast Iron Maiden song. It's just got these sort of synth pads in it. That's the thing too. All the synths on this album, except for maybe those really creepy choirs during the title track, they're mostly just sort of pads. They're not sort of, you're not getting sort of Keith Emerson or Rick Wakeman keyboard solos or any of that sort of thing on this album. It's just sort of synth pads to give a little bit of extra atmosphere to these songs. And I think given the concept of this album, it kind of needed that, to give it that extra spookiness and that extra atmosphere. And yeah, I think that works well. The tempo change between the verse and the chorus is especially effective on this song. It's just a real, it's a jolt and it gives the song momentum, which I really, really like. And I love the fact that, with all his clairvoyance, the seventh son of the seventh son couldn't see his own end. It's kind of a recurring theme with a lot of clairvoyance in these sort of fictional things too, isn't it? That they can see everything except themselves. It covers a lot of ground musically and lyrically in just a 4.5-minute song. It's really quite an astonishing feat in that respect, I think.
I agree. I love that bass intro. I'm not always a big fan of bass intros with Iron Maiden, but this one here is fantastic. Leads right into a really cool guitar lick that carries through the song. It's got a really good, frantic, tense Nico McBrain drum beat. When Bruce is singing, feel the sweat break on my brow. And Nico's like, it's very effective, very tense. It really leads to a wonderful release during the choruses. This is a Steve Harris solo, right, by the way. And as far as the lyrics go, perhaps Harrison was right about the character dying at the end of the prophecy, because this song refers to the reincarnation theme of this album. As soon as you're born, you're dying to be reborn again. And I have a feeling we're going to find out some more about that on the next and final track. But before we do that, Harrison's going to tell us what he thinks about the Clairvoyant. Go ahead, Harrison.
Yes, this was the first song written for this album. It was the one that kickstarted the Seventh Son of a Seventh Son theme. Steve Harris wrote it inspired by the death of famous psychic Doris Stokes, and he posited that, if she was psychic, could she foresee her own demise? And so then, he brought it to the rest of the guys. He had Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and they were off to the races. Bruce, in particular, really liked the idea, and so that sort of revitalized his creative output after Somewhere in Time. So, yeah, I really like the Clairvoyant for all the reasons you've described. It's a great song.
But that takes us to the end. Only the Good Die Young, which... well,
not
you
a Billy
were talking
Joel cover.
No, not a Billy Joel cover. Bicyclelegs was talking about how this album can get lyrically dense at points, and I think this is one where we are, but I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a super energetic album closer. The concept that that evil seems to live forever, where the good die young sort of thing, that kind of resonates with me at the moment. I don't want to get political and all that sort of thing, but just the idea that evil lives on forever, just that idea really kind of resonates with me at the moment. This song is a real tour de force. Everybody gets a chance to shine at various points in the song, which I think is great. Again, as you say, it covers a lot of ground in 4.5 minutes, lyrically and musically. It goes all over the place. It has a lot to tell. It's almost like oh, shit, guys, this is the last song. We've got to get all our ideas in here. We've got to wrap the story up and all that sort of thing. But it still works. It still really, really works. And I love the callback to Moonchild at the end. I'm an absolute sucker. People will know this if they've watched some of my other content. I'm a sucker for albums that are bookended. And I love the fact that this is bookended. Also, you talk about this is not the Billy Joel song. We have to tell people that Moonchild is not the King Crimson song either. It's very, very different from the King Crimson song, Moonchild. But yeah, no, it's a terrific way to end the album. It really, really, ends with a bang, doesn't it?
It really does. And of course, the circular nature of the ending, the reprise of the acoustic bit. That's the reincarnation theme right there. And I love Bruce's sly little 7 holy paths to hell instead of "and your trip begins" as he sang it in the opening on Moonchild. I loved that. When I first heard that circular bit at the end, I was like, man, that's it. I'm flipping the tape and I'm listening to it from the start again. That's just it was brilliant. It was brilliant that they did that. But yeah, great song. Lots of venom in the lyrics. So I think I'll leave you with your bishops and your guilt. So until the next time, have a good sin. And, there's lines like, measure your coffin. Does it measure up to your lust? He's really spitting out the lyrics of disgust at the society that has rejected him, the character in the song. And he indicts them for their crimes. This is a Dickinson Harris co-write, by the way. I think it's a brilliant track. I think it's got some great hooks to it. One of my favorite Maiden closers, in fact. And although we did kind of mention that it would have been fun to see Seventh Son of the Seventh Son as the closing track, I think Only the Good Die Young really, really works. And to me, it's the only way to properly end this album. So take it out, Harrison. What are your thoughts on the final track of Seventh Son?
One of my favorites on the album, top tier Iron Maiden deep cut. When we did our list way back on the LeBrain train, it made 4 lists, the only song to do so. I love the harmony riff gallop that's sort of akin to the Trooper from years previously. And my favorite part of the song has to be that quiet bass solo, like and then as the riff sort of punches back into gear. Like you get this like briefest moment of reprieve for Steve to do this cool little gentle bass solo, and then bang off to the races again. The chorus, it is slightly underpowered compared to the rest of the song, but it is catchy and has a hook that works. I just think, if maybe this was a few years prior, Bruce would be singing in a higher register. But that's the minorest of trifles. I love this song so much.
All right. Well, as you know, when we first indulged in our first Maiden singles when this album was released, we found some B-sides as always. So we're going to quickly run through the B-sides. The first 2 I want to talk about are Black Bart Blues and Massacre. Now, I know Bicycle Legs, you had some thoughts on these 2. Would you like to share them?
Yeah, I mean, Black Bart Blues, it's obviously played for laughs, especially that sort of, spoken word stuff with the child's voice, which I don't know if that's a real child or whether it's a manipulated voice in the studio.
I always understood it as a sort of exaggerated groupie. Like a character.
I always saw it as a nerd.
Okay.
As a nerd. That's so okay. So we have 3 different interpretations.
Well, there you go. I mean, musically, it's kind of a heavy metal blues, isn't it? Which, again, isn't sort of a characteristic thing for Iron Maiden to do. So I get the impression that this was something they were just sort of farting about within the studio and decided to turn into something that they could then put out as a B-side. And you especially get that sort of impression with that whole sort of Nico McBrain ranting and stuff at the end, for the last sort of couple of minutes of it. It kind of goes on a little long for my taste, but I mean, it's obviously there for comedy, and they were just like, oh well, we need something for the B-side, let's put this out. It's fun and it's silly, but it's inconsequential to me anyway.
You know what's cool though? There's one bit in the Nico section of Black Bart Blues, which I think it's like snippets of studio tomfoolery, but there's one bit with the Evil That Men Do riff on keyboards where it's like wow 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 wow, and you get to hear this weird keyboardy version of it. And I always thought that was neat. And Nico does a few of his what who said the ting in this song, and he also reprises F My Old Boots. But Black Bart Blues, kind of a neat song, I think. Aside from being interrupted midway through by what I call the guy Nerdo. Okay, so we're gonna go with Nerdo for my spiel here. But I do like it. Bruce scolds him. What you do that for? They put the song back on. I you're allowed to goof around on B-sides, and Maiden had done that before. So for me, I was happy to hear this, and that Nico stuff. I had no idea what the heck was going on, but we've listened to it over and over again and tried to decipher his words. Then we have the Thin Lizzy cover Massacre, which that's just a little bit less goofy. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I mean, this is from like the Johnny the Fox album, which is one of my favorite Thin Lizzy albums. Thin Lizzy in a lot of ways are a perfect band for Iron Maiden to cover because they both have that twin guitar attack, and I think Maiden do sort of a heavy metal version of Thin Lizzy because, Thin Lizzy, except for maybe that last album, were never a metal band. They were a rock band, a hard rock band. But, Bruce's voice is definitely different from Phil Lynott's, but I think the cover still works really well. You can tell that Maiden really, really respect Thin Lizzy, in their version and the way that they do it. It's a quite faithful cover in a lot of ways. It's a great song from a great Thin Lizzy album, and Iron Maiden do a really, really good cover. They do the song justice.
To me, it really kind of fits in with more of an early Iron Maiden sound, maybe Peace of Mind and earlier. So it was kind of welcome to hear Massacre and that B-side. For anyone who thought that the album might have been a bit too keyboardy, Massacre certainly, fills that certain hunger. Harrison, do you have any thoughts on those two B-sides?
Yes, Black Bart Blues. It's a fun little catchy song, but I could really do without the groupie intro and the Nico 3 minutes at the end. I'd rather just listen to the song. Massacre, on the other hand, I really, really love this. I think it's the best cover Iron Maiden's ever done. I love that drum intro, and then the guitars come in, Bruce's voice soars. I think this is easily their best cover. And I think it's criminal that it didn't get put on Best of the B-sides, and you have to buy the old First 10 Years single or the 1995 bonus disc version to actually get this on CD.
Yep, it's on this version. There we go. As are two other B-sides, which were 1988 re-recordings of Prowler and Charlotte the Harlot, which I thought, hey, that's kind of cool. They wanted to do this to get Bruce and Adrian and Nico on the tracks. They're much cleaner. They sound like 1988 recordings with Bruce on lead vocals. I think they're good to have. They will never replace the originals. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts to share about them. To me, I enjoy listening to them.
I've never considered Bruce's versions of these two songs to be any good, except for the Beast Over Hammersmith version of Prowler, and I consider these versions to be the nadir of that, simply because they're not live, so that makes it even worse for me. It becomes very apparent on Massacre and these two songs that Seventh Son of a Seventh Son has a very unique guitar sound to it, and that guitar sound being that sort of featuring on this proggy album does not fit the grounded Prowler and Charlotte at all. I will admit that the extra Bruces on backup at certain parts in the songs of Prowler, and particularly the chorus of Charlotte the Harlot, those are actually neat. I thought those were cool and a nice innovation on the song, but everything else I don't like these. Don't listen to them.
Okay, so there's two contrasting opinions on that. The final B-sides, because we're not going to bother with the Infinite Dreams single. All of those tracks were on Made in England, which Harrison and I are going to cover in a separate live episode.
Infinite Dreams itself was taken from Made in England too. It's
right,
more of a live single from that album than it is a Seventh Son single.
Yeah, so that's how we're going to treat it. We're just going to talk about the last ones here on the Clairvoyant, which for the first time ever, they replaced the studio version with a live version for the A side, and they also did The Prisoner and Heaven Can Wait. So I just had a few thoughts to share about these. A lot of these live versions, I'm more attracted to the unique things that Bruce might say in the introductions. So I kind of like how he introduces this song to the Donington crowd. They're playing Monsters of Rock, and Bruce sings, "Hope you like it." But then he also says, "Mr. Dave Murray on the famous pink oboe." I'm not sure what that means. I hope somebody can tell us in the comments.
It's just a joke. When Bruce would introduce the band, he, for example, in Paris, 1986, he said, "On the 6-string fiddle, David Murray."
Okay,
So he does like these sort of comical, exaggerated, funny instruments that they play, basically.
Gotcha. I noted that Bruce's voice is notably rough compared to the studio version. The added grit is cool, but it's definitely noticeable. Next, we have The Prisoner. "Let me see those hands." And then he says, "F it." Don't know why. I love that you can hear Adrian singing the answer vocals on the chorus so clearly. That's just a nice touch that you don't get on the studio version. It's clearly Adrian singing the answer vocals. Nico's drum work is incredibly tight, and if you pay attention, you can even hear him throw in some cowbell. And then we have Heaven Can Wait. I love Bruce's stuttery intro. This is a song about heaven or hell, whatever he's saying there. It's just, I like Bruce's sense of humor when he introduces songs. I always have. This song goes a bit long, but it's a bit of a concert staple, so I will let it go.
Actually, when I listened to this, I had to use YouTube because I didn't have the single. There's somebody who comments, "I thought this song sounded like the tempo was really fast, but it's actually, the same length as the studio version." The studio version is over 7 minutes, which was a surprise for me because it doesn't feel that way.
This one kind of dragged for me, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
Yeah.
Harrison, you want to talk about these singles, and then you can
Donington,
talk about the tour.
88 tour. Bruce's voice really ragged. The grit is cool, but you can really hear him struggling anytime he has to go high. He's struggling on the chorus of the Clairvoyant, for God's sake. I mean, it's like Rob Halford, 1984. It's like, it's a tough listen sometimes.
All right. Well, what about the tour? Why don't you take us through the 7th tour of a 7th tour?
Right, the 7th tour of a 7th tour, 102 dates, 28th of April to the end of December 1988. So not only was it a 1-year tour, it was a shorter tour in dates. They didn't go all over America, as I said. Like, they did go to America, but not in the same depth as they had previously. The support list for this tour was incredibly long. I'm just going to rattle off some of the most famous ones that you may or may not have heard of. This little old band called Guns N' Roses, Vinnie Vincent Invasion, David Lee Roth, Anthrax, Megadeth, Wasp, Halloween, Metallica, Trust, LA Guns when they were one band, and Fraley's Comet. And that's not even all of them. It was a crazy support list. Right, so the set list. So I'm just going to read off the set list because you'll know when I get into it why I can't just talk about it generally. They were considering for the first time playing the entire album in full, but in the end they only played 6 of the 8 songs. It's like, they only didn't play 2, which were The Prophecy and Only the Good Die Young. So the set list is Moonchild, The Evil That Men Do, The Prisoner, brought back out after a few years, Wrathchild, but it was only played from August to October. Still Life, which was added into the set list. Great to hear Still Life again, by the way. The only other time it was played was its World Peace Tour, but it was added on the 18th of November, so at the very end of the tour. Die With Your Boots On, also added on the 18th of November, another Peace of Mind deep cut brought out. Infinite Dreams, the only tour it's been played live. The Trooper, which was replaced by Killers on the 18th of November. So if you get Donington, you'll get to hear The Trooper, but if you get Made in England 88, you'll hear Killers. Can I Play With Madness? Heaven Can Wait, Wasted Years from Somewhere in Time, making a return. The Clairvoyant, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, Number of the Beast, Hallowed Be Thy Name, Iron Maiden, Run to the Hills. 22 Acacia Avenue was played August to September. 2 Minutes to Midnight was dropped after September 10th. And then Running Free and then Sanctuary was added on the 20th of August. So for an Iron Maiden set list, a lot of extra shuffling and adding and subtracting that there usually is, which is why I just had to list it in full. So I spoke about some live albums. Donington 1998, they were headlining. It was the first time they were headlining that festival. Not the last time, but it was marked with tragedy when two fans were crushed in sort of a stampede of the crowd. They also recorded their dates at the NEC Birmingham, which would go on to become the full-length Made in England live album. Now, as we sort of mentioned earlier, this is the nadir for Bruce's voice. He's really struggling on the high notes. Thankfully, this is the last tour it would be like this, but it is a shame that certain songs like Still Life and Infinite Dreams, while they still sound great, there are songs like Hallowed Be Thy Name, which is unlistenable from this tour. But, as I said, it's the last time they did it. They played so going forward after this tour, in terms of album representation, they played the three singles a lot. They've been all over the set list. But Moonchild, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and Infinite Dreams rarely got played. Infinite Dreams only got played on this tour. Seventh Son and Moonchild only got brought out for the Made in England tour. Right. So that just about wraps it up then. We will be talking about that live album, Made in England 88, when we go live next week. But for now, I'm going to wrap it up with giving Seventh Son of a Seventh Son the full 5 out of 5 stars.
I'm going to go 4 out of 5 stars myself. I do want to quickly talk about the artwork, though. Harris and I are going to dive a little bit deeper into the artwork when we talk about the first 10 years box set. But there are 7 Eddies on this album cover. If you go to the back, we have Eddies number 1 and 2 from Killers and Iron Maiden. You can kind of see the face from Iron Maiden and then the Eddie from Killers. Then we have Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind. Then we have Powerslave Eddie. We flip it over and we have Eddie himself and the son of Eddie, the 7th.
Yeah, there's probably less glare on my copy there, actually, on the back cover. Not only that, you got the Book of Life, you got a bird, which I think is meant to resemble the Concorde. There's
Yes.
England here.
Yes.
And on the front, my favorite thing about this surreal artwork is here on the front, where right there you can see that this water that's rippling also has like an iceberg chunk taken out of it.
That's right.
Which
It's
just adds to
liquid,
the
but it's
surrealness.
solid. It's a really cool piece of art. Anyway, as
And
for
we
my
don't
score,
often get like light blue artworks on album covers. Like this light blue white is a really rare sort of color. I'd love to see
And
the
it really
Contrarians
jumps
do a
out.
show on it, on like ice,
really-
basically.
well, we just did water recently, but
Yeah.
this was and this was one of the honorable mentions for that. But this
And
really
you probably
jumps
only
out.
get a whole bunch of. You probably get a whole bunch of Christmas albums if you did ice. Probably not a good idea.
Probably, you're right. This is my favorite album with ice on the cover, though. I'm going to go 4.5
Mine
out of
too.
5. 4.5 out of 5 stars for Seventh Son. Bicycle Legs, what is your score and final remarks?
Yeah, I mean, it's a 5 out of 5 album for me. As I say, it's always been a toss-up between this, Powerslave, and Peace of Mind as to which one is my favorite Iron Maiden studio album. My favorite Iron Maiden album of any album is Live After Death, which is unusual for me. I'm not normally a big live album guy, but for me, Live After Death's just like the perfect Iron Maiden statement. But that's, again, a bit of an unusual take for me. But this is my best friend, Grant, not our friend Grant Arthur, but my best mate Grant here in Brisbane. This is his favorite Iron Maiden album. It was his introduction to the band, and he still loves this album to death. So I'm sure he gives it at least 5 out of 5 as well. But yeah, I mean, just that whole run, from right from the debut, but particularly from Killers through to this album, I think is just an unmatched run in Iron Maiden's catalog. But that's, again, just my personal taste.
I think it is an unmatched run. Oh, and one other thing I forgot to point out about the cover. You have the ceiling lamps, which kind of take the place of the street lamps from the first 2 Iron Maiden albums. Now, as a finale, this is my sealed reissue, and we're just going to open it up. Take a look inside. There we go. Let's take a look inside at the inner sleeve. I've always liked this piece.
Mm.
It wasn't
I think
good
that
enough
would have
to
been a
make the
cool
front cover.
Clairvoyant single art.
It would have
Yeah.
been. They say it wasn't good enough to make the front cover, but I think it's really cool. There's the crystal ball that you hear about in the lyrics a bit and featured on the stage. Now, as far as the stage goes, it was one of Iron Maiden's most elaborate stage shows to date. The album
Massive
itself,
ice pillars, and also the whole thing was covered in white. The monitors were wrapped in white.
yes, it looked so good. And the album, obviously, also very in depth, very layered. And unfortunately, this meant change because maybe they were getting a little sick of writing 10-minute songs that repeat over and over and over again because things were about to change. But we'll get there next time after we talk about Made in England. So, on behalf of myself and Harrison, thank you for joining us on this episode of 50 Years of Iron Maiden. Check out Bicycle Legs Talks Music on YouTube. Give him a like, give him a subscribe. He's got some great content, especially if you like prog. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining me, and we'll see you next time on 50 Years of Iron Maiden.